Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Good afternoon, my Kardec Radio friends. This is John coming to you again on Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock to deliver a chapter reading. Well, I shouldn't say chapter. It's more like a slight segment because it's only usually 1 or 2 pages from the book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, given to us by the Spirit Emmanuel through the mediumship of Chico, Xavier. And we usually read the message and then offer some comments and then say a prayer. And a prayer these days is so very, very important because we use that prayer every day at Kardec Radio at 9 o'clock. Vanessa Anceloni delivers a 9 o'clock prayer, usually at 9 o'clock. Prayer for peace. And then at 6 o'clock each day, we offer prayers by various hosts. And this is no different. We emphasize the peace aspect of this message, building peace in our heart. Today's chapter number is 164, entitled, Let Us Not Disturb. So let's bring that up. Okay. Let us not disturb. The New Testament quote is given to us by Jesus, recorded by Matthew in chapter 19, verse 6. Therefore, what God has joined, let man not separate. Emmanuel then writes, this divine word does not refer only to matters of the heart. The ties of love are characterized by sacred bases, and the marriage commitment or household commitments are always linked to higher principles. Human beings cannot deceive the authority of the law by making use of material means to flatter their senses. By breaking the natural order that governs their pathways, they disorganize their lives. Nevertheless, the principles that harmonize life will always surface, correcting and restoring. Jesus' warning is much more significant, however. Do not separate what man has joined can mean do not disturb what God has harmonized. And that particular sentence, do not separate what God has joined, can also mean do not disturb what God has harmonized, I think is the key. There's much more in this chapter, but I wanted to stop here because harmonize was mentioned before, above. And nevertheless, the principles that harmonize life will always surface, correcting and restoring. And this is the key to this, is not disturbing the harmonization that God has put before you. And we'll offer some examples. Now, Emmanuel continues to write here, no one can say that they are unaware of the divine purpose. A duty, no matter how hard it may be, is always the Lord's will. Furthermore, unless a person is still asleep at the level of the brute, his or her conscience, that vigilant sentinel of the eternal, is capable of differentiating between obligation and escapism. The Father has created beings and joined them. He has also created situations and things for the common good. Those who disharmonize the divine works must be prepared to restore them. Those who violate a divine law are shackling themselves to the consequences of their unfortunate action, and they often spend centuries unshackling it. Nowadays, an overwhelming percentage of people, millions and millions of them, after having separated what God has joined that is, having wrongly disturbed what Providence established for the good, are working to repair what they have done. Another important section of this particular message. Emmanuel continues, let us esteem the organizations of the righteous judge, organizations that the notion of duty points out to us in every situation. Sometimes it is possible to smile while disturbing his works, but we will be invariably forced to repair them with sweat and tears. And that's the end of the message, or at least what Emmanuel has written. And again, here's the key. Let us not disturb God's harmony. And further down, duty is always the Lord's will, and we must figure out the difference, between obligation and escapism. And he suggests using your conscience to make this determination. And when you do, if you come from a love and forgiveness standpoint and an understanding and serving standpoint, then you're on the right path. Everyday life offers us responsible duties that we might have a friend or a relative that is convalescing in a hospital or maybe in assisted living. And we have knowledge of this, and we would be stimulated to go ahead and visit that person and determine if there's anything we could do to help that person. Now, how do we disturb that harmony that you've gotten notified that somebody's there? It's again, maybe a relative or a friend. And harmony, we will refer to the dictionary about harmony. And normally, when we talk about harmony, we think about music. And the first definition in the dictionary that we looked at talked about the combination of musical notes that produce chords that have a pleasing and pleasant effect. The second definition is the quality of forming a pleasing and consistent whole, blending, say, like old and new together to be in harmony. And this is what Emmanuel's writing about. Taking care of being responsible, the responsibility to take care of people and blending things together, let's say in a family. You can love and forgive within the family, because there's always going to be a particular family member, if not more than one, that is going to need that love and forgiveness. Say you have a member that might get involved with some activity of drugs, and supporting that particular member rather than disparaging that particular member is a way of continuing the harmony within the family. But once you start villainizing the person, complaining about him, and spreading rumors about the person, what we're doing is we're making it more difficult for them, because we're putting this toxic energy out into the universe, and we should be loving the person, praying for the person. Another, and that I think that family is really key as far as this message is concerned, because he talks about earlier on commitments of marriage as a commitment and household commitments. And of course, marriage is one thing where you've come together, and for many of us, if not the majority of us, it's raising children, and that is a major commitment. But then there's also household things that you must take care of, and that's, working to support the family members, and also education of the family, how you raise your children, especially in those formative years between when they are born till they get to about 6 or 7 years old. These are all duties that are given to you, and of course, it's easy for us to talk about not reacting to situations that happen, but this is how we learn, through effort and repetition, by understanding that we are disturbing when we allow certain things that happen within the family. The beautiful things, the good things that happen is easy to take, but we also have to be calm and serene about things that happen. Maybe when the child comes down with a particular illness, or gets influenced by other family members. And we talked this harmony within the family. How can you disturb it? Another way that it's easy to disturb this harmony is one of the family members may use curse words. Another family member may drink alcohol, and of course, rather than so we must be careful with our words, and making that person understanding that they're being a very poor example for the children that are in the family or other members of the family, and exposing them to this type of language. It's fine if you're going to use it someplace else. Even then, it's not a good idea. But take it outside of the family, just like with drinking alcohol. If you're going to drink alcohol, take it outside of the family. Again, it's not a good idea, but this is something you have to work on to correct. And there's one of the major disturbances that people get into, especially when it relates to the family, is committing suicide. Many people that take themselves away from their family, their work, their responsibilities, they really don't have an idea of the responsibility they're going to have and the necessity to correct. You're going to have to correct the situation, because as the Father has created beings and joined them together, He has also created situations and things for common good. And when you when you take that life, you disturb those family members. And there are requirements for you as you have entered in. Unfortunately, you'll find out as soon as you take your life that life goes on, and then you're on the other side of life, and you're going to have to recuperate and be remediated through a very extended process, and it's set forth in a wonderful book called Memoirs of a Suicide by Yvonne Pereira. So that is an example of what he says here. Nowadays, an overwhelming percentage of people, millions and millions of them, after having separated what God has joined together, and of course, suicide is probably the ultimate way you do that, because you're separating yourself from this life, from this family, and all of the objectives that you set forth for yourself before you came back. Most of us, if not the vast majority of us, had a reincarnation plan. And that meant that you were to live your life and try to fulfill those objectives, which are obligations that you had for making up for things that you've done in the past. And now you're just making it more difficult again, because you're going to have to come back again eventually when you earn that opportunity to make up for those things. So this message is just loaded with the warnings, and I loved his Emmanuel's ending, where he says, "Let us esteem the organizations of the righteous judge," organizations that the notion of duty points out to us in every situation. And of course, we have these duties that we have to fulfill each day of our lives, towards ourselves and towards other family members and towards friends and towards work and towards everybody, because you never know where you're going to be. And he says, the sentence that ends this thing, "Sometimes it's possible to smile while disturbing his works, but we will invariably be forced to repair them with sweat and tears." And that's the situation that you put in. We're going to end the commentary here. I think that's been enough. And let us close our eyes and offer up a little prayer. Dear Mother, Father God, Lord Jesus, Mother Mary, and the spirits that have been here with us, we thank you for the opportunity to deliver and read this message and offer some comments about it. We know how important it is not to disturb the harmony that's brought to us, even in those situations that are difficult. God has put them there for a reason, and we must address them. We must overcome them. God will not give us anything that we don't have the courage and the will to overcome. Let us always remember that. And it's our duty to fulfill that and not to offer up other excuses for not fulfilling that obligation and duty. We humbly ask for God's infinite love and healing energy to be sprinkled throughout our family members, our friends, our neighbors, across the whole of the United States, which is so divided now, with so many people putting forth their agenda for their particular section or segment of society and not being inclusive of everyone. Eventually, this will happen. We know it must happen in order for the earth to progress to that higher level of a regenerative earth. We must continue to regenerate ourselves to make us evolve to a higher level in how we treat people in an everyday circumstance. God created us to love, to learn to love ourselves primarily, and secondarily to love everyone else. Once we have this true God's love, we recognize the God within us. We can also offer that to all of other people. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and we thank you for your guidance and protection, and ask to end this little prayer session. And so be it. Well, thank you, my friends, for being here, whether you're here listening now or on demand later on. We will wish you a happy rest of the day, and we look forward to being here next Thursday at 4:00 to read another chapter and say another prayer.
We hope you have enjoyed our program. Spread the word, Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.